I want to go back to media.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I really wanted to chat with you about is, when did you kind of notice the weaponization of mainstream media start to happen?
I mean, it's like you're too close to things, you don't get it at all. I didn't realize how totally corrupt, that there is no ideal at the center of it that in any conceivable way benefits the public's interest, democracy, any of that, informing the public so they can make informed decisions on who to vote for. Like, that is the last thing from anyone's mind. And it's actually the most corrupt institution in the United States by far. What do I know? It's the only one I've worked in, but I can say it's fundamentally corrupt. Like, there's no non-corrupt part, period. And I realized that, incrementally over time, it's the kind of thing I'm still realizing. I don't consume anything, like, period, anything at all. I don't want it in my head. Mm-hmm. I don't want flattery in my head, and I don't want lies in my head. Of course, they both manage to end up there, but I have a pretty tight screen because I just don't want that. So, it's totally and utterly corrupt. And that's why I'm coming to this late in life, and I'm coming to it cold from working in the institutional media for over 30 years to all of a sudden not in the last year. And so there are a lot of things that are obvious to you and your viewers and that are not obvious to me that I'm just learning. I'm like, wow, I really do feel like the last Chinese soldier, like coming out and being like, the war's over, really? And everyone's like, yeah, it's been 20 years, that's like how I feel. But I'm amazed by podcasts. I just think, talk about it on a likely vector for truth. Podcast? When podcasts first started, I mean, I was not even aware of it, of course, because I'm like such in a different world. But I became over time aware there was things called podcasts, and I was like, well, that's not going to work. Because the one thing we know about information is it's being diced into smaller pieces. And ultimately, TikTok will be our only news source. Like, TikTok didn't exist, but like the idea that like 15 seconds of video would be your source of information, that seemed obvious because that was the trend line. Shorter, faster, shallower, more pictures, fewer words, like those trends were really obvious. And they were real. But the idea that people would sit and listen to something for like hours is the opposite of what was happening in my world. And I was like, who would listen to that? Who would ever listen to that? Meanwhile, not only was the media, which is a source of all of our information, degrading and becoming not only more corrupt, but more obviously corrupt, but our educational system was completely collapsed. The humanities collapsed. There's no education, like none. That's not an overstatement. I have a lot of children. They have a lot of friends. I have young people who work for me. No one learns anything in college, like at all. It's only in the humanities. I'm sure electrical engineering is different. Veterinary school is different, but in the sort of broad middle of like, I'm going to take English, history, communications, media study, all this, it's all fake. And so that was happening. And what I didn't perceive is that all of that stuff was moving to podcasts. I guess because I have such a dark and pessimistic temperament, thank you, Scandinavia, I assumed that because the products that people were consuming were getting worse, that people had lost their desire for good products, I guess. I assumed that without thinking of it. But it turned out that, no, they were just getting it from a different place. Like, there's a hunger to learn. There's a hunger not to be lied to. People can tell when they don't know exactly what the truth is. I have no idea exactly what the truth is about anything. But I know the direction it's coming from, and I definitely know lying. And there's a natural human desire not to be lied to. And to, what is that? To understand things. Curiosity is a human thing. Curiosity died in the media. They're now officially opposed to curiosity. Just asking questions is a crime. In fact, it's my crime, I have noticed. Just asking questions. Oh, what? I will never be embarrassed to ask questions. Sorry, you can't make me embarrassed of asking questions.
Yeah.
My motive is irrelevant, by the way. My motive happens to be fairly pure. I am interested, but even if my motive was sinister, it doesn't change the fact of it that answering questions is never bad. Period. Whatever. But as the mainstream media, the big media companies were becoming just arms of the government and just full North Korea media landscape. No one knows anything. It's all lies. That is where we are. I can say that with great authority, having worked there my whole life. There was this incredible renaissance happening in the most unlikely of mediums, this podcast. And not just about politics, but about history. It's incredible. I mean, there's no way if you go to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, where I went, not an impressive place. But even if you go to, I don't know, pick a school, Dartmouth, probably not going to learn that much about legitimate history. You can learn it instantly. And podcasts, millions of people are. You learn about the fall of Rome, 470. You know, what happened? Why did that happen? Or just the details, the Punic Wars. Name it. It's on there.
Yeah.
And then that is the world headquarters of free thinking and honesty. Man, of all the trends, and again, this is right in my world. This is media. That's my world. Of all the trends in the last 30 years, that is the last one I would have predicted and the most hopeful. It's incredible.
How do you like doing it?
Well, I absolutely love it because it's how I grew up.
Do you like it? Do you like podcasting better than?
I've done a total of 2 podcasts in my life. I mean, I've been on, well, in the last year, I'd never really been on. First of all, I work for a big media company. Mm-hmm. We have our own world of promotions or media relations. I think the last company I worked for called it that, but it's just the PR department, okay? And we have our own way of doing things, and it's a huge company, multi-billion-dollar company, and they have a way of doing it, and all these like 28-year-old girls are telling you what you got to do an interview with New York Times Magazine, whatever. So I'd never done podcasts. That's not even on their radar. They didn't even know that existed, really. They thought like Esquire, where I used to write, or New York Times Magazine, they thought that was really impressive. It's not impressive at all. No one reads that crap. No one believes it. The people who do, you don't care about because they're dumb by definition. They read the New York Times and believe it. What? You'd have to be like a pretty delusional, low IQ character to be in that position right now. No, I'm serious. I've read a lot for the New York Times. Like I used to read the New York Times every day, but it's absurd and everyone knows it's absurd. And if you don't know it's absurd, then I don't care about your opinion. Like I'm not even going to argue that with you. So I had never done podcasts really. And I did like a hunting podcast in Maine once because I knew the guy or whatever, but I'd never done podcasts. So the last year I've done all these podcasts and I loved it. It was like so fun. And it was fun because it's exactly how I grew up. Like this is like the most natural thing. This is how I grew up. This is what we did for entertainment. Sit around the table and talk about what you think and what you've read and be as honest as you can be.